So today we're going to talk about American Horror Story because you and I worked on season 1. My name is Gabriel Diaz and I am an editor.
My name is Cesar, Davila, Irizarry. I'm a composer, sound designer.
We're in Los Angeles right now and we're in an old house, which I think is fitting for season 1 of American Horror Story.
Yeah.
I'm a little fuzzy about how we met, but I think it was 98, 99?
It must have been 98, if not even 97.
Okay.
Through the website with a calendar of different events.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then I met your band.
Yeah, I was playing in a band, guitar.
Yeah. And that's how the friendship started.
Yeah. And then our bands were playing like a lot together.
Yeah.
For a little bit.
Different clubs in Puerto Rico, bars and clubs and festivals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I left my band and you left your band. Yeah. And then we ended up playing in the same band for a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we jumped like 10 years later maybe. You went off to do other studies in the States. I moved with my wife to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up working at this company that primarily does title sequences. The name of the company was Prologue Films. And I've been there like a little bit, like 4 years or something like that, when American Horror Story came in. The story about that is that originally I wasn't working on that. I was on another job.
Huh.
I was working on a Toyota job, which pays the bills. People may not know this, but title sequences don't pay that much. And it's really a sacrifice for like design companies to make them. And they do them because, you know, they're kind of cool and it's like a prestige piece and all that. So I wasn't working on that. And then they had shot it. They were shooting, they were also working on the title sequence for Final Destination 5 at the same time that they shot the American Horror Story title sequence. And so when I got into it, it had been, I think, already like a week that they had been working on it. There had been like 3 editors working on it, which is kind of usual for those type of companies. A lot of times in design and editing, they put like a couple of people on it just to see who has the best idea, or at the end just pick like the best idea out of everybody, right? So the Toyota job ended. And I actually really wanted to work on the title sequence for American Horror Story because I was a fan of Ryan Murphy and I kept reading about the show and I thought the idea of a horror anthology was kind of cool for TV. And I had worked previously on a title sequence for the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay.
And even though like pretty much all I did was not use, and that happens. Like, I thought I did some really cool stuff and I was very happy with that work. So I was like, oh, maybe we do something again. So luckily the Toyota job ended and I was able to start working on American Horror Story. Kyle Cooper, who is the owner of Prologue Films, he was the creative director. He shot it in the basement of this old studio in Los Feliz.
Okay.
They used to be owned by Charlie Chaplin. It's either Los Feliz or Silver Lake. I don't remember. So they shot in the basement. They shot in a 16mm, which I thought ended up looking really amazing.
Yeah.
So from what I understood, it's kind of fuzzy right now, what I remember, but they didn't get everything they wanted from that shoot. I don't know if it was for budgetary reasons or technical reasons. They couldn't get... Like, what the idea that they had originally was that, I think the character was the Infantata, which was the dead kid from the, spoiler alert, it was the dead kid from season 1 American Horror Story who kind of turned into a monster who was in the basement who attacked people. So the original idea was the camera is the POV of this creature.
Okay.
And that's why they kind of shot it low. And it's just going through the basement and it's like finding like the jars, or it's finding another character, or it's finding all that. I don't know why they weren't able to do it. Maybe it was like the length of the basement or something like that. So they had all this footage, which I'm thinking was like 2 hours of footage, right?
Okay.
And they were just trying to figure out what to do with it to kind of make it cool and make it nice. So I got all this footage, and pretty much the direction I got, since it was so open now, because we really didn't have like a storyboard or anything, the direction was make it scary. Which seems like a very like logical thing, but it's actually like so much more complex. Like even before I saw the footage, I was like, man, like how do you make a 1 minute piece scary? And like you can make it freaky, you can make it disturbing, you can make it disgusting, but scary seemed like a big task. But that was kind of like the order that we got, and so I started editing. My process usually is I just look at all the footage once, then I go making my selects. Then from that all those selects, I put them in another sequence, and that's my select sequence. And by this point, I had done like a bunch of title sequences before, so I had some experience on it. And a particular experience I had was this idea of like making these kind of like not story driven, kind of surreal, kind of music video edits that weren't storyboarded. Because a lot of times, like title sequences, they do a storyboard and you follow the storyboard, and that's usually how you edit. But all these other times, either between the process or just how it ends up, you end up getting like either like 5 different ideas that you're trying to make into one, or just, you know, like it always happens, like they couldn't shoot this, they couldn't shoot that, so it doesn't work anymore, so you have to find a way. So I kind of had experience with that. And what I do in those moments, which I found very helpful, was that I call it like modular editing, which is like, there's this whole big thing, I don't know how to make it cohesive, I'm just going to take little pieces and make like these 3-second moments that I know that are cool and I know are going to work. Like an American Horror Story, like when like the baptism baby's clothing is falling in the water. Like I'm like, okay, so that's a moment. So I made that moment like its own edit. It's like, okay, it's 3 seconds, and I like that it's fast at the beginning and then slow at the end, and so on and so on. That's the technique that I built to kind of make sense, and then you start putting in the sequence and go like, oh, so this is the ending, oh, this is the beginning, and then you kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah, you connect the dots.
Yeah, exactly, because then at least you have a story in a kind of vague sense, because
it feels like you're triggering people's imaginations so they create the story, and that's even scarier than anything else that you can show them.
Yeah. And I think that's the only way you can use, like David Lynch calls it, like dream logic or something like that, where you just have these like points of references.
Yeah.
And even me sometimes I'm just like, I just have like, let's say these 3 points, and I'm filling it in, not making any logical decisions, but I'm like, oh no, this like, without making a decision, now this first part works really well, even though it feels like I'm putting like random things, because it's kind of like the story's kind of being revealed as you're kind of building it.
Yeah.
So I did that for a little bit, but as we know, 50% of everything we see is sound, is music. So that was like a big thing, and especially a title sequence, because that's what drives it. So they sent us like 10 songs that they said that they were like, that inspired them to write the script, or they were using while they were writing the script, that maybe they were going to use in the show. So we got that. I think it was a CD at the time, actually, like an actual CD that we ripped. And there were different things. There was Firestarter by the band Prodigy, which I think ended up being like one of the final songs in the show. There were some Bernard Herrmann scores from like Psycho and some less known movies and Vertigo. And then there was also this old song, which I think is from the 1920s or 30s, which they ended up using in one of the first scenes when the twins are destroying the house at the beginning, which is Tonight You Belong to Me, which is these little twin girls who are singing it. And out of all of them, I felt that was like the closest one. So I laid that down. I also tried a Bernard Herrmann track. So I laid those down, and I started working with them. And Tonight You Belong to Me was kind of cool. It was creepy. It was weird, but it still wasn't scary. It wasn't like getting me to where I needed to go. So then I was just trying to like in my mind, trying to like imagine what song would go with this. Oh, because here's the other thing. So another thing I like to do when I do title sequences is usually when I get the music, I lay down the type first over black.
Okay.
Because it's a title sequence and that's like the first.
Yeah.
That's what it is
Yeah.
at the end of that. Like you in the title sequence, you have to show the titles. The second thing is like get people excited for the TV show to kind of hype you up, and I think third thing is kind of like either tell a story or tell little things about the show, right?
It's one of your modules.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So since I kind of didn't have a song, I didn't do it that way, and one of the things that they had asked for was very specific was the font. They chose a font that was this kind of old font, and then the creative director kind of chose a different font, but it was the same kind of family of this old like 1930s. I think it was like Art Deco type fonts. So I got those fonts. And they wanted to make the titles like huge, like fill up the screen. And I think it was because the trailer for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo had come out like 2 weeks before. And so they wanted to do that, which was cool because that's like that was an amazing trailer, and I really liked it too. For some reason, the art director didn't want to do that. And he refused. He'd done this like small type. So it was like, but they're asking for big type. He was like, I don't want to do it. I'm like, okay. So I ended up doing it in Final Cut Pro, just putting the type big to fill in the screen just as big as I could before it was like title safe. And then just that, the title was like, okay, so every time there's a title, it needs to be like, boom. Like, it's so aggressive in your face that this title is huge that I felt like the music had to do that. I'm gonna say like a week and a half passed of me working on this and not being able to figure out the music. I think I tried some Johnny Cash. We tried a lot of things. And then in my mind, I remember this kind of like beat and like song and like this explosion. I think that was my thing, because something that I realized while I was working on it was music makes a lot of movies scary because it creates tension, and something that I was thinking about was like the jump scare, which is like just a loud noise kind of taking you out. And I that's when I kind of realized, okay, so this title sequence is not this kind of weird surreal dream. It's almost like a mini horror movie with like jump scares and scary moments. That's how I make it scary, but how to do that. And then the sound that I was singing in my head was your song. That song you had showed me years past. I still had the CD, but I had it like in my iTunes, and I just went and laid it down, and I was like super excited because I felt like, okay, so now this is connecting like the beats and the titles, but at the same time I was like, okay, so I don't think if they're gonna like it because it's a little bit a strange thing, but let's talk about how that song came about, when it came about, and all that.
That song came about me just experimenting with sound for the first time. I had been interested in experimental music and the degradation of sounds in a digital way, and I was stretching different recordings. I was playing around with samples, and yeah, like that song also came from an emotional side, because I wanted to let go of very emotional, I don't know, like of letting go of people.
Of course, yeah.
So I wanted to create something sonically that represented what I was feeling, and at one point I decided to just throw coat hangers to the floor.
It's amazing.
And
yeah, come up with that.
It's, you're just testing things out and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And back then the process was very slow because the computer was really old. So I would start rendering the sound processing, go to Blockbuster, rent a movie, come back, watch the movie, finish the movie, and then wait for a couple more minutes for the thing to finish. Because it will be like stretching maybe 10 seconds into 30 seconds, or maybe 5 seconds into 30 seconds, or 45 seconds. And right now it just takes 2 seconds. But back then it would take a couple of hours.
Of course,
And at one point I did that with the coat hangers, and I liked it. And I started putting it together as best that I could, because I didn't really know multi-track recording, which is very common today. And I didn't know anything back then. So I put that together, and I played around with some samples in a way that it wouldn't be distinguishable what it was. And that's how the rhythm and the very mysterious melody comes in. And because of how I treated those sounds, the melody sounds much more like a ghost. And then you put those two together, that subtle, haunting, kind of quirky rhythm and that striking, harsh noise, and it makes you feel something. It forces you to.
It totally does. Yeah.
So I see how, like, you putting that in the titles glued everything together. Because at the end of the day, sound affects you psychologically in ways that people do not perceive. We are a very visual, visually centric society.
Definitely.
So you can use sound in ways that people don't notice. You can be discreet and influence how they're thinking. And that's where the jump scare comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like the great part of like music. In a way, it's kind of good that as a society we're so visual, because then you can use all these sound things to kind of as a trick, as a gimmick. Because with visuals, we're so visually literate now that you can kind of do everything and it's already been done already have been done. Like fast cutting or like cross cutting, all these things, they've all been done. And yes, they have an effect on people, but it's definitely a lessened effect of like quicker cuts or anything like that. But with sound, since we're still kind of adapting to that, I feel, because we're so obsessed with visuals, I feel that it's still like a good toolkit for like filmmakers to kind of, like you say, do the jump scares and things like that. So I was really excited about how the piece worked with that song, and for some reason I just thought, they're not gonna go for this. They're not gonna. This is too weird. I'm like, I like it, and I'm gonna keep it for myself.
But it is a really weird song.
It is, and probably the reason why I remembered it was because it was very weird. I didn't listen to that song that many times.
I
probably listened to it like twice.
And
I still remembered it, especially because I just like that big beat. So I was doing that, and I already had like the safe version of the other "You Belong to Me" one. And I remember showing it to one of the producers, Lee Buckley, who was also on the shoot, because he was always like asking me like curiously like how's it looking, because he knew like it was a little more complicated and they didn't get everything that they wanted to shoot. And I'm like, oh, I'm working on this, and I showed him that version like on a big screen TV with music, and I remember like his reaction. He was like struck after he saw it. I was like, play that again. And I played it again.
I wish I had seen that.
I know, right? Yeah. And he was like, dude, that's like really like scary freak. It's like, what the hell is that song? And I explained, no, my friend, he wrote it like a long time ago, but I remembered it, and he was like, oh, this is great. So that kind of gave me a little bit of more confidence about showing it to the creative director. And so I sent the two versions to the creative director. Used to do it like through like just putting stuff in his Dropbox, and he would check it during the night. So where I worked was on the other side of the room where he worked with another editor. So I could hear what he was listening to or working on, which is not great, but that's the way it was. Like it didn't have any insulation in the walls. It was really thin walls. So I think it was the day. Actually, I showed Lee like at night, and then the day later, like in the morning, he played the "Tonight You Belong to Me" version, and then he played the other one. So I heard the music playing in the other room. I heard it like starting up. And I was kind of like, what is he gonna think? Maybe he's gonna hate it. Maybe he's gonna be like, "You're crazy." So it ends. I hear the door open, and he comes out, and he calls me. He's just like, "Can you come in my room?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "What's that song?" Like, and I explained to him, and he's like, "This is great." Like, he really liked it, the way it gelled, because it did. It just really gelled together. He gave me a couple of notes of shots that he didn't like, so I took out those shots, and I think very soon we presented to Ryan Murphy. By the way, all this time you did not know anything about this.
No.
I didn't say anything.
Wasn't it like 2 weeks after that?
It was probably like 2 weeks after.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I didn't tell you because, you know, it was just all moving so fast, and I didn't think it was gonna get there.
Because we know how this business is.
Yeah, because we know how this business is. You
Yeah.
do all these things, and 90% of the time they don't happen. So they presented it to Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, who were the producers, and I think a couple of people of effects. And I think they presented like 8 edits or something like that. Because like I said, there were 3 more editors working on it. They were all doing different things. Again, some of them doing the small type, some of them all of them using different music. None of them were using your music, just mine. And yeah, they came back from the meeting, and Ryan Murphy and Brad were like in love. They told me they were like ecstatic about this song, like, and how it worked. And I don't know if it was because of the song, but I literally got like no notes about visual things, about changing anything. It was like, this is what it is.
Isn't that beautiful?
That was amazing. Like the other notes, the only notes that we got, which was later from the network, I think there was one shot that showed like a lot of blood. They wanted to tone it down. No, I think they were actually like afraid that people may not like react well to the title sequence. Be like, oh, what kind of show is it? They didn't want it to look like torture. So we had these things of like, which are not in anymore, of a man being wrapped in like plastic and kind of being choked. That was like the only thing that they were like, okay, this is too much. That, and there's a scene where there's like some, like a knife, like a butcher knife falling on this thing that has like a lot of blood. So we took a take that had less blood. Same thing, there's like a guy, there's a moment where the camera pans and finds like this guy wrapped in plastic, and there's like a little bit of blood. Again, a take with a little less blood. Little Easter egg. The producer who I showed, Lee Buckley, who I showed the thing first, he was the guy in plastic. So he lost this moment in the sun with that. But actually, at the beginning I was like, I don't want to change anything. As you always say, I was like, this is perfect, I don't want to change anything. But I think it was really good that changed, because there was pretty much no humans in it afterwards, which made it feel like really, really empty and even more scary.
And even more about the house.
Exactly. Even more about the house, about the emptiness. You kind of see shadows moving. The guy that I said that's like wrapped in plastic, like, you kind of see a guy there. The other one's like the gardener with the shears, and you kind of see him there, but it's not. So I think it really helped a lot. But so then I think some time passes. We're doing these notes, and my boss tells me like, oh, so we need to talk to your friend, because they really want to buy that song. So that's the moment that we're gonna tell you, which I didn't want to tell you. Like, I want to wait a little more, but my wife was like, no. My wife Evelyn was like, no, you have to tell him, like he has to know about this. Like, he's like even thinking about stopping making music. Like, he doesn't want to do this anymore. Like, he feels nothing's happening. I think I called you like a super late hour in the night, because
I know it was later than 9. It must have been 10.
Yeah, I think it must have been like 10 or something like
Guess
that.
when I saw the call, I'm like, really?
This is strange, yeah.
But something happened, because this is not the norm.
Yeah. What did you think when I told you that?
I mean, it's completely coming out of nowhere for me.
It is.
Because it's a song that I had not thought about for over 10 years. And at the time, I was working as a sound designer. So there's all these studies I had taken, all this knowledge I had accumulated, and then all of a sudden, my very first experiments from back when I was just trying out things happens to be the one that might be the most recognized in all of America or the world.
Yeah.
It makes you think about your aesthetics, about your technique back then, and how you want to apply it now with all of what you know.
Yeah. Did you think also, like, this is more like now, but do you think more also about like instincts and stuff like that? Because it's like, here's your thing, your first thing that you did that people are responding to, and you kind of did it through trial and error instincts, not putting, I wouldn't say thought into it, but not putting that much direction because you didn't know where you were going.
Mm-hmm. I think instincts as in flaws.
Okay.
The importance of flaws in what you make. So, for example, based on that, on how people have reacted to that song, I knowingly make imperfectly sounding decisions that are very well thought out. But if you move things a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, you just make them slightly odd. That gives them a character. Like humans and like life. Yeah. Life is very imperfect.
Yeah.
And for things to really shake you inside, to shake your soul, they cannot be cookie cutter objects. So yeah, it definitely has, and still every day I think about how flaws is what make us react to the world.
Yeah. And that's interesting you said it. Just reminded me of something about the title sequence as well in terms of the visual, which is like the thing you say about length. Lingering on shots just till I felt like, okay, this is a little too long, and leaving it like that. Mm-hmm. And making shots purposely shorter to kind of like confuse. Like I had that similar thing, and maybe I was inspired by the song where it's like this idea of like imperfections of like this kind of being slightly off. To be honest, like when I started making the piece, I was really thinking about like Nine Inch Nails videos and especially the Mark Romanek videos like Closer and
I mean, Nine Inch Nails is the reason why I got into sound.
I know, yeah.
So it is an influence.
I know.
A huge influence.
Yeah, it's interesting how it was like an influence, and it was definitely an influence when we were playing together in our band. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting how it influenced you to do that song, and it kind of influenced me, his visual aesthetic, to kind of follow that, because I was like, again, going back to the scary thing, I was like, how do I make the scary? I'm gonna think back. Okay, so I remember the first time I saw the Closer video. I don't think I watched the whole thing. I thought it was like, oh man, this is too much, and I'm like, I'm gonna watch that just to kind of get inspired. Mm-hmm. So I looked back at it and saw these like staying on shots for like not a usual amount of time, and then other shots being really short, and like it had a similar vibe too because of the whole like it was very filmic and old film, and Closer had kind of this like steampunk kind of idea to it. So that was one of the things that I kind of went back and really like inspired me to kind of follow that when I was looking at it more as like a dream or like a nightmare, if you will. And then when I put in your song, that's when I was like a little more, okay, no, I'm going to structure this like a horror movie.
And the song itself, the beat, I pushed it to be a little bit longer. I pushed the loop to be a little bit longer.
Okay.
So it's kind of like
that's interesting.
Off a little bit. So even then, I knew about the imperfections. I didn't speak about it as eloquently or whatever as I do now, but yeah, that was an idea. So I was pushing it a little bit. I was pushing that limit a little bit, and then you are pushing yourself with how many frames you add.
Yeah.
And frames are very important. Sometimes just 3 frames can mean a whole lot.
Make a huge difference. Yeah. But it's funny that you say that about you doing the things longer, because you're right, it wasn't a perfect 60.
Yeah.
Like, the way you structured the song, it wasn't a perfect 60. So since the song was like an imperfect 60, and it didn't hit like where I wanted to hit because again you have like these little rules of like how long a typed card should be, and the final title card that said American Horror Story, it had to be like a good 2.5, 3 seconds.
Okay.
So I wanted it to hit the beat. So when I came up with that idea, I was like, okay, so I'm just gonna leave this kind of like noise in it to kind of like do the jump scare when her name comes in. Mm-hmm. And also because I was so excited that Jessica Lange was on a show, and it was on this show, because I had read the script, and the script was great. The pilot script was really, really good, and actually got me really excited to work on the show. So when I saw that she was like kind of doing a comeback, I was like, okay, no, she's like a big star. So her card needs to be like in the best moment. Mm-hmm. So I purposely put her like there, and it was like, oh, it's perfect because it's kind of going down, and then bam, it's Jessica Lange, which is kind of what happens on the show. It's like you're not expecting her to be this great character. So it's funny you said that about the about the song kind of being off, because I remember having to kind of get it to like the right place.
Yes.
So I guess that my question to you now is, so what happened when they called you to ask for like the song?
So when they called me, when you called me, or when FX?
No, when like FX called you.
When FX called me, it was interesting because I was hanging out with you. So we were hanging out, and they called me. I stepped to the side, and as I'm hearing how they are interested in the song, I'm like, hey, like it's happening, it's official. And basically at that time, they just told me that they wanted it, and then they would send me the contract. I think that's what happened the first call. Later on, they told me that they needed it. They needed stamps. And the thing is that back when I made the song, like I mentioned before, I didn't know anything. I only had the stereo file, and that's it. Now I know about stems.
Of course, yeah.
When they called me and told me about it, I knew about stems.
Yeah.
But I was just too excited to realize that they were going to ask me for them.
Yeah.
And then at that moment, that's when we ended up making an agreement where I gave them some of the rights, because I couldn't make the stems right away because I was booked through like that week and the week after. So I gave them some of the rights. They hired someone else. I crossed my fingers it was gonna be someone good.
Yeah.
And then when I get the contract, I find out that it's Charlie Clouser.
Yeah, exactly.
Which to me was amazing because he worked in The Downward Spiral, and The Downward Spiral is the Nine Inch Nails album that influenced me into going into sound. So I see that. It's funny because at first I'm like, this cannot be the Charlie Clouser. I Googled the name because I'm like, there has to be some other dude, and no, it's him. And I got excited. I signed, we made the deal, and he worked on it. I gave him notes on how I worked on that because he needed basically to recreate a sample.
Yeah.
So I gave him as many notes as I could on how to recreate those things, and I think maybe like a month after there was the premiere.
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
Yeah, and that's when I finally saw the final work that he did, and it sounds just like it, which is great. And then I met him a year after that, when we were gonna pick up our first award for it.
Which was what award?
The BMI Film and TV Music Award.
Nice.
It was really cool because I tapped him on the shoulder. I'm like, hey man, I'm Cesar. And he's like, you're the reason I'm here. And it was
awesome.
Yeah, it was a great moment. Yeah, and it's beautiful because it just went full circle into.
I know, couldn't believe it. Yeah.
Even though we weren't together when creating the final result.
Yeah.
There was still some communication, and it was good to meet him.
Yeah, and I don't know if I heard this from you or maybe I saw an interview with Charlie, but I think they tried some different things with the song to maybe change it,
but at the end, like, they decided to kind of stay true to the song, which is great.
Yeah, he told me that he made 4 different versions based on what he thought that they wanted.
Yeah.
Which is what he imagined, because he never really got notes at first.
Okay.
He went up, on a more cinematic feel, I believe.
Okay.
And they kept saying, no, this isn't working, until finally they said, can you make it sound as if nothing had been done, but
change the things you need to change. Yeah.
And basically he isolated the different elements I had created, then recreated the one element that needed to be changed, but still sound pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And then placed everything back
Yeah.
to where it was.
Yeah.
And even just that process, I think, added to the feel.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Of that spooky feel that sounds like ghostly and here but not here.
Yeah.
Which is perfect for a show that's supposed to scare you.
Which, by the way, like, the best compliment that I've ever gotten from the title sequence after a premiere, which, like, got a great reaction after the show premiered, and the title sequence too. Like, usually don't see people talking about the title sequences in reviews and the music, and they were talking about it, which was, like, super exciting for us. But the best thing anybody's told me is, like, I watched it once, I'm never going to watch it again.
Yeah.
Because they were so freaked out by it. I was like, that's a great compliment, like, mission accomplished.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to affect people with your art, be confrontational about it.
Yeah. Definitely the coolest part of this was being able to kind of work with you, or even though we didn't work together, it was kind of cool to kind of reunite the band again. Of us kind of like working together. But yeah, I think one of the things that I'm kind of really happy about is that we created this thing that seems to have this really good longevity. And then every time I see it, or, because I don't work with that same company anymore. I left after season 1, and I worked a little bit on season 2, but after that I haven't been involved in any of the title sequences. But it's kind of cool to kind of see them evolve and be different, and
it's like a kid. You watch it grow.
It's true.
Interact with other people, and other people tell you about how much they like it and how passionate they are and how scared they are of watching the titles.
Yeah.
So
and and it was cool to see like how they used it for the branding, and how I heard that it was even playing like at Universal Studios, like Horror Nights. Because they have like a haunted house that's American Horror Story.
Yeah, it's strange that we know each other from so long, and we made this thing that has become part of pop culture. In the whole world. And it is something special, and we can always go back to it, and it makes me wonder about like what new things are you passionate about right now? Like, what are you working on that you could share maybe?
I just did a title sequence for the show Waco, which I think was really good, and I'm honestly just trying to focus more on like my own projects. I work with my wife, and we're trying to shoot all these things and direct and create video content. So I think that's kind of like reignited my passion again for like creating. Just like I've been working so long as an editor that I'm kind of excited just to try something different and start something from like start to finish, from conception to shooting it, to putting music to it, to designing it, to doing like light color work and all that. So I'm hopefully we'll do a lot more on that, and I'm very excited for that. About you?
I'm collaborating with a lot of people focusing more on music, from short films that are horror and comedy, and I even wrote for strings and added sound design to it, being very musical, and so that's with a bluegrass band that's very dark, and they've been calling it blackgrass.
Oh, nice.
Eloise, and working with a performance artist, and definitely many projects, including my own personal projects that, like you mentioned, I'm exploring all these things that I wanted to explore, and I'm free to do it right now, so I'm taking advantage of that. It's an exciting time.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Because yeah, like just thinking again back to it, you know, us playing back in bands in Puerto Rico, and then like not even trying, just ended up working together and doing this thing that I'm really proud of, and it's definitely one of the works that I'm just most proud of. It's one of those magical things where everything fell into place. So
yeah.